Hello, everyone. My name is Father Joe Shea. My last name is pronounced like O'Shea without the O. So you say my last name twice, it means that thank you in Mandarin Chinese. So next time you go to the restaurant, you can practice my last name twice, and it's basically said thank you. Let me see here. You can see my PowerPoint, right?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep. It doesn't actually too sad, but my brain is.
Okay, I'll just assume you can hear me and can see me. Let me begin by sharing something about the orphanage that I co-sponsor. All of my honorarium for the talk and royalty go to the support of the orphans at this orphanage. It's called St. Mary's Home. It's in the Jiaodan, Myanmar or Burma. It's about 50 acres. It's a good sized orphanage run by the Servite sisters. And you can see the inside. And the right side is a chapel. They dug up a hole and put a Marian shrine in the middle. You can see there, and put water around it. So they raise fish and shrimp in the water. And the houses behind the water, those are chicken houses where they raise chicken. Some of them are layer chicken, they lay eggs. Others are less fortunate, they're going to the restaurants. And these are the sisters who run the orphanage. And these are the orphans. And if you notice, they're all women. So this is a women's orphanage, girls' orphanage. They bring them from ages 4 up to about 18, 19, 20. They educate them, food, raise them, they clothe them, and feed them. And so by the time they reach 18, 19, they could be on their own. And they like whatever I'm doing. They're all paying very attentive to what I'm doing and saying. So anyway, and this is the Cardinal Bull on my left. He's the highest ranking prelate in the country. And on my right is a friend of mine. So that's the orphanage. Anyway, so one of the reasons that prompted me to write my book was the document issued by U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in 2018. The pastoral letter against racism, Open Wide Our Hearts, provides a brief overview of a racialized history of Native Americans, which I'm glad they did, and also African Americans and Latinx. But it has rendered the struggles and experiences of Asian American and Pacific Islanders, or API, completely invisible. This has proven to be an embarrassing omission. Shortly after the pastoral letter was promulgated, surges of anti-Asian hate and violence erupted across the country. And the pastoral letter had nothing directly to say about it. Many of the victims of these anti-Asian hate and violence were Asian American women and Asian American elders. So let me say something about these two groups. A word of warning, the next few pictures that will show is quite vivid, and I have to describe some violent scene. Shortly before the pandemic, there was an Asian American woman sitting in a subway train with a mask on. And another woman punched her because she was wearing a mask. And no one intervened to stop that. And a month or two after the pandemic was declared, another Asian American woman was walking into a building, and another woman grabbed her on her hair and punched her because she was wearing a mask. She wasn't wearing a mask. So it's damn you do, damn you don't. Some of the more vicious type of anti-Asian violence, happened to women. And one of them was, a series of them happened beginning of last year, 2022. This one was in January. Michelle Alyssa Go was waiting for the subway train, and the homeless man shoved her in front of the train, incoming train, and she died from that. And a month later, Christina Yuna Lee was going into her apartment. She was opening her door, and another homeless man pushed her way into her apartment and savagely stabbed her to death dozens of times. There are many other incidents. I'm just picking out at least 2 or 3 of them. A year before that, in 2021, a vicious attack took place in Midtown Manhattan on a sidewalk. An elderly Filipina was going to mass, probably afternoon mass, and she was kicked by Brandon Elliott, unprovoked kick. He kicked her and knocked her to the sidewalk. Elliott was on parole. He was convicted of fatally stabbing his own mother many years earlier. And as elderly Vilma Kari lay on the sidewalk, Elliott uttered some racist remark and walked toward her and stomped her head 3 different times. This entire incident took place in front of a building where the security guard of the building witnessed the whole thing. So instead of rendering support, he callously closed the glass door and walked away from it. Unfortunately, this type of scenario is repeated throughout elsewhere across the country. Attackers who lack moral decency, who target the most vulnerable citizens, and bystanders who said or did nothing in times of crisis, happens or occur on a regular basis in our country. The pastoral letter doesn't have anything direct to say about this, but surprisingly, Pope Francis did. In this encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, the latest encyclical, Pope Francis provides an example that eerily resembles the kind of violence we see on our streets. He said, someone is assaulted on our street and many hurry off as if they did not notice. He called this symptoms of an unhealthy society. That, I'm reading from the screen now, for all the progress we have made, we are still illiterate when it comes to accompanying, caring for, and supporting the most frail and vulnerable members of our developed societies. We have become accustomed to looking the other way, passing by, ignoring situation until they affect us directly, unquote. The symptoms of unhealthy society occur on our street on a regular basis. They presage a disillusioned society, a disintegration of the kind of respect for the dignity of the human person codified in the Christian tradition. And this is what happened when markers of human dignity had eroded to the point that what we're left with is a society full of cowardly criminals targeting the most vulnerable population, and bystanders who remain silent in times of crisis. In a civilized society, we expect members of society, especially the most vulnerable population society, to be able to not to be afraid to do the kind of things they need to do for survival, to live a healthy, happy, and fulfilled life. And this was not the case for many Asian American elders during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many were afraid to go to the grocery store or even to leave the house, their house. They're afraid to go to the pharmacy to pick up their meds, to take the public transport, to meet doctor's appointments. They were even afraid to do the kind of thing they used to do before the pandemic, walking around the neighborhood, for fear that they might be verbally harassed or physically assaulted. This is what happened when the virus of hate and racism accompanying COVID-19 is creates a situation that is dangerous and despicable. The more virus of hate and racism has been part of the US history long before even the first sizable group of Asians came to the United States. And these were the Chinese in the 19th century. Before they came, there were all kinds of negative stereotypes against them. They were seen as depraved heathens, opium addicts, disease carriers, and all other sort of negative stereotypes. Of course, the othering of immigrants and foreigners with infectious diseases is something that have been repeated throughout American history. You find it almost every immigrant group. In 1793, Germans were alleged to have to bring the yellow fever with them, and they called them the German flu. In 1832, 1849, the Irish were blamed for cholera epidemics in New York City. In 1916, the Italians were suspected of polio outbreaks. And 1870 to 1905, the Chinese were blamed for smallpox, bubonic plague, and all others public health crises. Oops. While the German, the Irish, other European group were folded into whiteness and were no longer seen as carrier diseases, the Chinese and other Asians, due to our physical visibility and supposedly alien cultural differences, were and still are seen as carriers, contagions, and diseases. The Chinese who came to the US in the 19th century settled mainly in California and elsewhere on the West Coast. It was very difficult to bring Chinese women at that time because America wanted Chinese labor, but not the Chinese themselves. They don't want the women to be here because they don't want California and the rest of the country to be populated with Chinese. Because racial segregation was the norm, they were forcefully separated into racial ethnic enclaves, popularly known as Chinatowns. The early Chinatowns reflect the common vices of the bachelor society. There were mainly men living there. There hardly any women because the immigration policy does not permit Chinese women to come to the country. So the Chinese population, even before they grew, they were living in like a pretty bad area, cramped it into small little rooms and apartments, and they shared those rooms and lived there. So it did not bode well when the sensational print media began to describe or portray Chinatown as breeding grounds for disease, depravity, and degradation. which found widespread acceptance among the American populace. So as the Chinese population grew, so did the xenophobia and racism direct towards them. And they were racialized and dehumanized as people who eat dogs and others, vermin like rats and mice. During the outbreak of smallpox in 1875-76, San Francisco official blamed Chinese Chinatown for the unsanitary condition in Chinatown that endanger public health. This was also the case with the bubonic plague that hit the area in 1900s. Basically, the Chinese were blamed for just about every public health crisis, and become an easy scapegoat for widespread violence against them. The association of Asian bodies with virus has persisted to this day, as COVID-19 is associated with anyone who is perceived as Chinese. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the two popular, we can say some of the racial epithet, racial slur can be categorized into two popular categories. One is the foreign outsider of, foreign outsider or foreign others. Example that would be, go back to your country, go back to where you came from. That would be example of foreign others. The other one is more devastating stereotype, equating Chinese or those perceived to be Chinese with COVID-19. So this is, I will call them dehumanized racism. This type of epithet uttered by former President Donald Trump, Chinese virus, China virus, Wuhan virus. The first one, the foreign others, foreign outsiders, are better seen within the insider-outsider binary. So in terms of the racial positioning in American society, people are attributed the first type of stereotype, foreign others, they are seen better in this binary. They are not like us. They are foreign others. They don't belong here. Doesn't matter whether they're born here, whether the family here, but many generations, they are not Americans. They are perpetual foreigner. Okay. Now many of the experienced Asian Americans usually fit in this horizontal binary, the inside-outside binary. There are a few exceptions. One of them is the second stereotype, the dehumanized racism. Here you have the idea of this form of stereotype can be seen within the vertical one, the black-white binary. This stereotype is racist because it equates Chinese with a virus, something that is less than human, something is not even human. In other words, although Black and Asian American have shared experiences of racial subordination in U.S. history, the experiences are often operating under two different binaries. The vertical one, the black-white binary, in which African Americans were historically denigrated as property and subhuman, and Asian Americans in the inside-outside binary, where Asian American are denigrated as perpetual foreigner, outsiders within their own country. That's important to keep in mind because you try to understand Asian American experience using the black-white binary. Most of the time, you won't be able to do it you come up with the wrong analysis. This Buying a little more complicated, but I'm not going to try to get into that. Just keep in mind the vertical binary is centered on race. The horizontal binary is centered on citizenship. So when somebody said you don't belong in this country, go back to your own country. While you can see that better within horizontal binary, that is still a racist. That's still a racist statement. Just want to make clear, just because in the horizontal binary doesn't mean it's not racist. Okay. So anyway, there are two incidents that went viral in social media in 2020, provide good examples of how race and racism is experienced differently by Blacks and Asian Americans, and how they are racially positioned in American society. In the first incident, took place on May 25th, the same day that George Floyd, murder of George Floyd, went viral. On that day, Amy Cooper, a young white woman, was walking her dog without a leash in New York Central Park, in the area where leash is required. An African American by the name of Kristen Cooper, no relation to Amy Cooper, asked her to put a leash on her dog in accordance with the park regulation. In response, she called the police, stating multiple times that a Black man is threatening her and her dog. By focusing on the race of Kristen Cooper in her reporting, Amy Cooper knew that the police would most likely side with her because she's a woman, she's also white. In other words, she exploited a system of white supremacy that could have placed Kristen Cooper's life in danger because Black men are perceived as dangerous in American society. Her decision to weaponize her white fragility is reminiscent of the long tradition of brutality against Blacks and anti-Black racism that is punctuated by Karen Bryant, who thought that 14-year-old Emmett Till might have whistled at her at a store. For this alleged flirting with a white woman, her husband and brother-in-law kidnapped and brutally murdered Till and dumped his body in the Tallahatchie River. In other words, Amy Cooper's premeditated decision to play the race card in her reporting to the police not only endangered Kristen Cooper's life, but tapped into a long tradition of African Americans being treated as less than human. But you can see this works very well within the Black-white binary. In this binary, there's the understanding of superiority and inferiority. Okay, the next example involves Amara Cooper. So I'm going to let Amara Cooper explain her own situation. So Erin can play the YouTube video at this time.
Awesome. Give me just a second for the screen share.
Racist rhetoric against Asians and Asian Americans has become a real problem in the U.S. amid the coronavirus that originated in China. The president is promoting this kind of language. He refers to and has referred to the virus as the China virus, as the Kung flu. And Asian Americans are reporting an increase in racist encounters. After one of my CNN colleagues, Amara Walker, experienced 3 such incidents during just one trip to New Orleans International Airport, she talked about it online, on Twitter. She wrote, quote, "I hate that I have to say this, but I belong. We Asian Americans belong. I was born and raised in the U.S. I am as American as apple pie, and I am as American as Korean barbecue. I am American. Please don't question me about that fact ever." Amara Walker is joining us now. Amara, thank you for writing about this. I think this was so important for people to understand what a lot of Asians and Asian Americans in the U.S. have been going through. Tell us what happened to you.
And that's why I wrote about it. You know, I wanted to be a voice for so many of us Asian Americans who don't speak out when these kinds of things happen. And I do want to say, Brianna, if I had encountered just one racially charged incident yesterday, I wouldn't have probably posted about it. But it was the fact that it happened back to back to back within a span of an hour, Brianna, is what really shook me to my core. And right now, I have to admit, I'm shaking right now. I still can't believe that we went through this, that I went through this. Okay, so here's what happened. First incident, I'm walking through the airport. An older gentleman stops, he pulls down his mask, looks at me, and says ni hao, which is hello in Chinese, and then ching chong, which is a racial slur that's been used for decades. And I was stunned. I mean, this has happened to me before, sadly, but every time it happens, it shocks me. And like I've done in the past, I just kept walking. I didn't know what to say. And he walked away, and the more I thought about it, my blood was just boiling. And thankfully, I ran into him inside the terminal. He was standing right behind me when I was trying to buy souvenirs for my husband and daughter. And I turned around and I said to him in a really stern voice, I said, "Do you understand what you said to me was racist and it was racially charged? Do you understand, sir?" And he kind of looked at me with a smug look, and he just said, I don't know what you're talking about," and he walked away.
Wow.
And so then I walked to the gate where my producer was sitting, and I was like, "You won't believe what just happened. I'm really upset. Here's what happened." And I'm not kidding. As if on cue, literally within like 5 minutes, a young man walks up right in front of me while I'm sitting at my gate, and he's not wearing a mask. He comes right up to my face and says, "Hey, do you speak English?" And I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And the first thing, I mean, I shot back immediately because I was already angry. And I said to him, "Why would you assume that I don't speak English? Tell me, why would you assume I don't speak English?" And he said, well, no, well, what language do you speak?" And I said, "Well, obviously English, but I also speak Spanish," because I knew he was expecting that I would say Chinese or Japanese or Korean. Anyway, I mean, and then he started to mumble and speak incoherently. It sounded like he was mocking the Asian language. My producer was really disturbed by all this. And also the people who were sitting at the gate started yelling at him to get away from me because I kept telling him, "You got to leave me alone. We're in a pandemic, you know, put on a mask."
Because he was getting close, he was not wearing a mask and he was getting close to you.
Exactly,
right?
You know, and so he was in my personal space.
And then your producer basically got security, right? Got a police officer, and then what happened?
Yeah, he interjected, so the officer, this is where, talk about pouring salt into a gaping wound, right? I mean, I told the officer what happened, Brianna, and my producer, who was upset, said, "Yeah, and, you know, this guy was saying racial slurs to her. Can you believe that?" The police officer stopped. He approached my producer, literally, again, almost nose to nose, and again, we're in a pandemic. And he said very angrily, "That is not racist. Asking someone if they speak English, that is not racist, okay? Do you understand me?" And I mean, this police officer was, I would say, 6'4", I mean, he was huge. And I was intimidated. Everyone around us was watching. My poor producer was, you know, both nervous and scared. And we said, okay, fine, it wasn't racist. And he walked away. They did track him down, but you know, I was so shaken by all of this and so disturbed that my producer kind of shooed me onto the plane and said, just you got to get away from this, you know. But I do, you know, want to say that my producer was extremely defensive of me, and also there was about 5 or 6 people who were sitting at the gate who came to my defense and were apologizing for no reason. They had nothing to apologize for, but they expressed their shock.
Yeah, I mean, it's thank goodness that they were there also just to kind of back you up and support you. But you write in this talking about getting made fun of as a child. But I also wonder if here in just in the sort of like, you know, recent years, but the pre-COVID era, did you ever experience anything like this? I know you travel a lot for work. Have you ever been through anything like this?
No, absolutely not. I mean, for it to happen, and look, these were all, I believe, were unrelated incidents, right? But for it to happen so quickly in succession within about 45 minutes to an hour, that to me was what knocked me off my feet. And Brianna, I want to make it clear, it's not about me. because Asian Americans across the country deal with this on a regular basis, and we're not talking about it. And many Asian Americans don't raise their voices, including myself. I probably wouldn't have written about this if this wasn't so egregious. And this is why I'm speaking out. I'm normally a private person, but I want to be that voice. And I have to say, I've gotten so many emails from strangers and even colleagues at CNN that I've never met who are Asian or of Asian descent. And they said, thank you so much for talking about this and explaining to people why it is racially insensitive to assume that I don't speak English or anyone else that looks like me doesn't speak English. Why would you assume that? Because you're saying that this is not American, that we are foreigners. You're marginalizing us, and you're telling us we don't belong. And I hate, and I wrote in my piece, or on my post, that I hate that I have to say I belong. I'm American as you. Why do I have to justify that I'm American? Why? Because of the way I look? You're judging me by my skin color?
Yeah, no, you shouldn't have to. And look, you normally tell other people's stories, so I know it's kind of a weird position for you to be in, but I also think there's so many people going through this who don't have the platform you have. And like you said, clearly they're appreciative that this is being discussed. They're going through this. You unfortunately have been through this, Amara. And I really want to thank you for coming on and talking about it and putting a face on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just mention one thing, Brianna?
Sure.
I mentioned in my post that, for the sake of the story, the first gentleman who approached me was a man of color, and I got a little bit of flack about that on social media. I mentioned it, and because there's this misconception out there that only white people are racist, or you can't be racist if you're a minority. This man, I believe, looked to be South Asian.
Okay. Amara, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I do screen share again?
Yeah, that should work to get your PowerPoint back up.
Most people have no clue that 23 the
Huh? Where are we? Let's see. Oh, all right. Let me go back to where we were. Why don't we break into groups and try to discuss these questions, 1, 2 on Amara Walker, and 3 and 4 contrasting and comparing Cooper's story and Walker's story, the two incidents. Okay, the first one, what took place in the first encounter is bigoted comment almost every Asian kid experienced while growing up in the United States. How would you help your community overcome such a deeply ingrained racial slur? Not about this is not the mimicking the Asian language, ching chong, that type of thing. If you are Asian American, you know almost all of us experienced that or grown up. Okay. The second one, why did Amara Walker receive some slack on social media when she revealed there was a man of color who uttered a racial slur at her? In the social media, she did not reveal that the man was South Asian descent. She just said it was a man of color. And then the third one, how was Kristen Cooper and Amara Walker racialized? And the last one, how did both incidents encountered by Kristen Cooper and Amara Walker highlight the systemic nature of racism in society? So why don't we take, I think we're plenty of time. Why don't we take, let's see, around 10 minutes and then come back. There used to be a very popular, it's still used today by many people. Racism is prejudice plus power. That goes back in 1970s. That formula probably works well in 1960s, 70s, 50s, and 40s. But there hasn't, people study these things that they haven't been able to find any proof to back it up. In other words, the question was Amara Walker on the social media she said a person, somebody who I guess the first person was the person of color. Maybe social media assumed that the person was black or whatever. The understanding is that person of color cannot commit racism because person of color do not have power. It comes on the formula, racism is prejudice plus power. Only people with power can commit racism. We know in reality, everyone can commit racism. You don't have to be white to be racist. I think that's what Ibram Kendi wrote in his book. He called it the powerless defense. He's basically saying that all of us have power. We may not have lots of power. Some of us have less power than other people do, but we all have enough power to commit racism. No one's immune for that. So in other words, we're not just mere puppets, passively conforming to the prescription or the ideology of white supremacy, even though we are all influenced by it. We are born into the culture, immersed in this ideology. We are influenced from day one. But we are responsible for our own actions. We have agency. We can't say, we can't do something bad and say, you know what? It's white supremacy to make me do it. Now, it's like saying that, well, I did something bad. It's my parents. I had bad upbringing. My parents beat me all the time. They made me do it. There may be some truth in that, but you are still responsible for your own action. You cannot blame it on anyone else. We are responsible for our own action. I think that's the point that Kendi is trying to make. And he gave lots of examples in his book about how people of color have power. And sometimes people of color use that power to oppress other people of color. So I think that's the question trying to get at. So Amara Walker is talking about, you don't necessarily have to be white in order to become racist. You can't be racist any color. In this case, the example that she gave is she said that she thinks the person is South Indian descent. That makes it with another Asian person who verbally assaulted Amara Walker, was comfortable enough in his own privilege to be racist toward her, despite being a person of color himself. Anyway, I just want to bring this out because that formula is so powerful. It's been used for so many decades that some people still think that only white people can be racist. But we know in reality that's not true at all. Even though white folks still have the most power. All of us have enough power to be racist. Anyway, any other discussion that your group dealt with you want to share? No one?
I just have a question of how you,
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question about how you think this operates with the recent Supreme Court decision on affirmative action.
No, okay. How race operate? No.
Yeah, I mean, specifically around the fact that Asian students, supposedly the plaintiffs, and sort of the dynamic between Asian Americans and then the Black and Latinos.
Yeah, that's a good question. The way I see it is basically very similar to the model minority myth. In this case, how Asians are used to pit Asian against other people, other people of color. Not all Asian America are in favor of eliminating affirmative action, and those who are in favor of it was being used by a group that basically wants to have more white students at these institutions. But anyway, it's one of those cases where Asian Americans are used to pit us against other people of color and to ignore the real struggle in higher ed. It's unfortunate that something like this happened, but the ruling is that was the case in California even way back when I was graduate school. I went to Berkeley, and in Berkeley you cannot use race as a factor in admission. You have to use race as one of the factors among many other factors to get admitted. So there are ways to work around that, to get to make it more diverse, the community. But there's definitely there will be fewer Blacks and Latino coming into these elite universities because of the ruling. But anyway, if you don't have any question, let me continue. Let's see if I can get my PowerPoint back. Okay, we're back.
Perfect.
Okay. I just want to show you this chart. The column 19th century, 20th century, 21st century. The opium addict, disease carriers, that was there in 19th century. It carried all the way to 21st century with the COVID-19 crisis. As I mentioned before, it was in 19th century, 18th century, almost every immigrant that come here, including European immigrant, were attributed with some kind of disease. But that disappeared when they were folded into whiteness, when they were considered white people. That doesn't apply to people of color. So one of the things you want to think about in terms of a social justice issue, how can you end this resurfacing of these negative stereotypes from the past? It comes up when there's crisis. In this case, public health crisis. It comes up when there's economic downturn. It comes up when there's a tension between Asian nation state and the U.S. Currently between U.S. and China. And it's going to get worse if the war break out. People like me, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be a target, basically, because we look like the enemy. Just because it happened in the 1940 when the Japanese American were incarcerated, don't think it's not going to happen again. I remember in 1990s when the U.S. spy plane landed on the Hainan Island. Because again, the plane clipped the Chinese fighter plane, I guess, and it was somewhat damaged, so it has to land on the island. So Chinese took the plane apart to figure out how the spy plane worked. And the people in the U.S. were declaring that the Chinese should put in the internment camp, not just like the Japanese in the 1940s. And the loudest voice at that time was not even white. It was the radio announcer of Hispanic background. That's the way racism works. You know, we internalize it, internalize the white supremacist idea and behavior. We may like to point a finger at other people for the forefinger pointing back at us. But the what the Chinese think today is harder to put the Chinese in the internment camp because there are over 5 million Chinese in the United States, as opposed to a few 100,000, maybe less than quarter million Japanese American in the 1940s. And the other problem is that people, you know, are engineers and scientists. A lot of them are Chinese and Indian background. And you need them, especially during war. You can't put them in internment camp. So if there's such a thing as an internment camp, they will have to selectively put us in that camp, and that will raise a further issue. But anyway, these things come up, resurface, doesn't go away. My question is, how do you prevent these things from coming up? How do you resolve the issue so that these things just do not come up over and over again? Like the last row, alien ineligible for citizenship. That means that you cannot own property because you're alien. You don't even belong here. You cannot be a citizen. You're ineligible for it. If you're born here, 14th Amendment doesn't apply to you because your parents were alien, ineligible for citizenship. The famous case, Wong King Ark versus US. He fought against that and won. But the Chinese were allowed to become US citizens in 1943, and by 1965, everyone can become a US citizen. But the idea that these Asian folks are still seen as perpetual foreigner remain. And one of the big incident happened in 1980s concerning Vincent Chen. He was a Chinese, about to get married to his bachelor party. Two unemployed white auto worker thought he was Japanese, and the altercation became violent, and they beat him up with their baseball bat and killed him. And neither of the attackers spent a day in prison. And the violence happened again in the 21st century. In this case, in this time was the public health crisis, COVID-19. So it comes up. It disappeared a little bit for a while. It comes out again. Next crisis happened. The same group of people get attacked. So my question is, how do you resolve this problem? How do you end this thing? In the case of the European immigrants, they became the main group, the most powerful group, the white group. That's how it ended for them. But that's not the solution for people of color. Part of the reason this problem persists is that we never tackled it at the structural and systemic level. We just tackled it at the surface level. And COVID-19 is over. We're back to a previous status until the next thing going to come up. Then we're back again. And the next thing will probably be China invading Taiwan. And U.S. getting involved there, and shooting war, a lot of tragedy, and we're going to be blamed for that again, even though we had nothing to do with that. So that's my question. How would you resolve this? These things comes and go, depending on what crisis we're dealing with. And this is a justice problem. I will tell you how a different group of people have tried to resolve similar type of problem. In Asian American history, in the early 20th century, 1910, 15, there were only around over 100,000, let's say Chinese in the United States. And many of them are old and they are bachelor because they weren't allowed to mix marriage. And they weren't allowed to bring in Chinese women to the country. It's very difficult to bring Chinese women to the country. And so they end up either marrying other people of color or end up as single, die as single. So most of these people do not have much money. They're not the 1965 immigrants. They're not the upper middle class, highly educated immigrant. They are the lower class. But they fought the U.S. through law. They sued the federal government by spending the hard-earned money to sue the government. There are over 10,000 lawsuits against the U.S. government from only 100,000 Chinese in the country. Of the over 10,000 lawsuits, only about 20 of them ever made any impact. All the rest would simply ignore and didn't do what they were intended to do. But they fought it in the way that they knew how, through legal means, because they did not have the critical mass. They did not have the numbers. And besides, they were all considered foreigners. They weren't citizens. And they did quite some impact, not just for Asian American, but all other races too. Now, African Americans have a long tradition of protests. It's a civil rights protest and things like that. And that's how they fought it. By going out there and protesting. Black Lives Matter and things like that. And that's something that Asian Americans need to learn from African Americans. Some of us only go out there to protest against, because our kids didn't get admitted to the Ivy League colleges. That's not the real issue. These are the real issue. Are you willing to be out there to protest against this? Wang Qingfu in the 19th century, a Chinese guy named Wang Qingfu, he would organize one of the largest, if not the largest, protests of the time. That's kind of amazing. To protest with this small group of people and try to get people of other race to join him, that's almost unthinkable. So there is a tradition of protesting in Asian American history. We need to learn from African American. We need to learn our own tradition. So these are some of the historical how different groups had done try to do this, try to break this recurring problem from happening again. We deal with different issues. African American deal with African American issue, Asian American deal with Asian American issue. But the tactic we use, we can learn from each other. Another thing that this is just from me, but I think it will be helpful if we tell our stories. Oftentimes, people don't know our stories. And it would be helpful to share what it means to be, in this case, Asian American. To be Asian Americans, how does it feel to be Asian American? It's hard to describe because the pervasive destructive stereotype that are part and parcel to our experience occur often at a subtle level. And these stereotypes are perpetual foreigner, yellow peril, and the mono-minority myth. Those who are not part of the experience may feel compelled to admit to hearing our story with a defective interior ear, but it's still important to tell our story. Because our story and our experiences are gifts that deem essential what it means to be American in our country, what it means to be American Catholic in the Catholic Church in the United States. And our stories are also part of the missing pieces, if you will, necessary for the attainment of authentic racial justice that cannot be achieved until the stories of all the various groups are part of the fabric of Americanness. If we remain quiet, don't say anything, people make all kinds of assumptions about us, and then the stereotype about us begins to circulate. I think we need to hit people at heart level for these things to change. Not just legally, but also at the heart level. And that's where the story comes in, the narrative comes in. Anyway, that's my take on it. Okay, we're not going to have time to do this. This is basically the what I just trying to answer. The sin of our past resurfaced in times of public health crisis, economic downturn, tension between U.S. and Asian nation state, especially war between U.S. and Asian nation state. How would you eliminate these sins or negative stereotype so that they do not resurface again? So my answer, historically, the Asian, especially Chinese, try to do it through legal means. African American do it through political activism, pro-protest, self-determination, and these are two good ways. I'm just adding one more thing to narrative. Our stories are also important. We need to tackle this at the level of the heart. That's when the people can see us as real humans. I agree. Anyway, that's it. I know my time is running out, so any question? Okay. Aaron, how long am I supposed to be this session? Is it 70 minutes, 75 minutes?
75 minutes, yeah.
75 minutes. So that means I'm already
We're about at 10.
3 minutes, 3 minutes over time, right?
Yes, but if you want to wrap up and take 3 more minutes, if folks can stay, they may, and if they have to go, they can.
Okay. Well, anybody have any comments or any questions or?
I'm just saying.
Thank you. That was really fascinating. Academic piece of it. The story part, yes, definitely, and the academic piece where you were sharing the differences between the African American approach to perspective, just the way to, I guess, the structure of it. It's just it was all very interesting. Thank you.
I just like to also thank you, not only thank you for the presentation, but in reflection on your discussion question. I think I am reminded of the depth and the long view of the work itself that we are committed to here, and how to eliminate these sins or negative stereotypes. I wish there was a quick and painless answer to that. But I will say that I think it's going to require people who lock arms to hear and listen to other stories, to be able to advocate, to be able to speak. And then even with people with power and privilege to come to a place where they are able to even admit that structures have been built a certain way so that there can be a dismantling and reimagining of a more just world. And so much of that really is the idea of getting to know and see people. So again, I mentioned this, like our lives were completely transformed in ways that we had not even imagined by having 2 Asian students in our home for an entire school year. And just the way in which that allowed us to learn and see and experience a different perspective, it's made us more fully formed. And so the best way I can help to answer this question is to be able to speak from not only my learning, but then also my experiences to help others.
Thank you, Mario.
I was just going to say that I noticed the same thing in Open Wide Our Hearts, that there is this glaring omission of Asians. And I feel like that points to sort of the main issue, which is invisibility. And so begging even more our need to tell the stories and to not be invisible and to speak out our voices. I think that's hard for Asians to do. So the allies and to have more courage to speak out loud.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Initially, I wanted to entitle the book as a supplement to the pastoral letter, but the publisher didn't want to do that. But there is another document that came out the same year from the bishop, Encountering Christ in Harmony. Let's see, this one, pastoral response. It has it's about 58 pages long, a page and a half on race, dealing with Asian American issue. It's not that well written, that page and a half. So I critiqued it in my book, and I think they tried to do something about race and racialization of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, because the pastoral letter didn't have anything about it. At least they tried, but it was poorly done.
Did they not have any Asian American authors?
No, but the way that these things are done is you have a series of working committees. So they invite people to come to these working committees, and then they have responses that go up the ladder. And the draft that the working committees finally sent to the bishop often overlooked the many ways in which the elements of Catholic social teaching are already operated in the Asian American community-based leaders. That's the different issue. But I want to show you one. This is in the pastoral response. And you look at it close, if I can move this thing. So it says that just as language is a distinctive social marker for Asian Pacific Islanders, physical appearance may further contribute to distinctions. And these distinctions can sometimes be negative due to racism, blah, blah, blah. And they are sometimes portrayed as being obtrusive, submissive, hardworking, or modern minorities. You may not think much of it when you read this stuff, but the problem is the word sometimes. It makes it sound like we don't experience systemic or structural racism. We experience racism sometimes we don't experience it. Sometimes we see it as modern minority, sometimes we're not. That's not the reality. You have to look at race in all its elements, structural, systemic, everything. You can't just say, well, for API group, sometimes they can be negative due to racism. Are you saying other times when we don't experience racism? So that's sort of a problem in the short page that they have in this booklet. I mean, they have a huge section, definition of racism from the late Archbishop. But they're nothing from definition of racism from people who study this stuff, who spend their life studying this stuff. They're nothing from the people themselves. The same thing with the pastoral letter. Nothing from, let's say, the section of African American. What do the African American really think about this? Or what do the Latino really think about their section of history? The same thing here. So that's the part of the problem. You don't write these things, without talking to people, or have somebody represented from the community to say something. And you have a definition of racism from a white cardinal, which is fine, but you have to have that definition from from people of color as well. They're the one who really experience racism. And what about the people who already, the scholar who study this stuff, spend their lives doing this stuff? How come you don't cite them? So those are some of the problems. Let's see. Anyway, I got some of the stuff. This is Jennifer Ho. Now I mentioned Chinese virus is racist. She went into more detail about why it's a racist and stuff. But what can you do? What can we do? So educate ourselves on the situation. Don't let hysterical and fear of the unknown dictate your behavior. Racism and discrimination do not have accompanied the fear of contacting this virus. This was during the virus, the time the virus was still in its peak. It matters who is speaking. Educator, our responsibility and duty to prepare our students to live and work in an increasingly multicultural society. And today there's all kinds of things going to try to get the public school to offer classes in African American study and Latino study and things like that. Like right here in Connecticut, this year we have an elective course in public high school, elective course in African American studies, Black study, Puerto Rican study, Latino study. And 2 or 3 years from now, there'll be Asian American study as well. So my thing is this. I'm glad that people from the community had a chance to study their own history. But that's not going to prepare them to live in a multicultural, multiracial world. To live in a multiracial, multicultural world, racial literacy beyond your own group is absolutely essential. In other words, if you are Asian, you need to have racial literacy beyond the standard history, which is white history and Asian American history. You have to know something about other groups as well. The same thing with the other groups. You cannot have an anti-racist education just learning something about the standard history. But we have to also know the pivotal role played by the black-white binary, as well as the ways in which the ideology of white supremacy has operated in lives of Native Americans, Asian American, Latinx, other people of color. And there is a way to do this because every group in the world is in the United States. It isn't possible to cover every single group, but there is a way to do this, to learn about each other. I've written stuff about that as well, but I don't think we're hitting the target. Having these courses is great, better than nothing, but we don't really prepare our student to really live in an anti-racist society. To do that, we need to know something about the experience. We don't. We end up thinking that now my group got it worse than your group. That may be true, but doesn't help building allyship. Anyway, be an anti-racist ally. Do not allow hate to spread like a virus. Speak out for victim hate crimes. Now, if you're on the subway station, somebody picking on particular person, if the attacker is white, most of the people on the subway are white, say something. Size matter. If 3 or 4 people challenge this guy, he will stop it. He won't try to if you're the only guy, and if the attacker is black, you're only black person on subway train, then you might be hesitant because you're the only one. But the more of you, you say something, usually the person will back down. It doesn't have to be color coding. Anybody can intervene. But be careful that you don't get yourself in trouble. Divert attention from the person being harassed. Confront the offender when safe to do so. Number matters. Oftentimes, that's usually nothing happens. Nobody does something. Nobody says something. The train stopped. They leave. Situation doesn't change. There has to be some more ethical consideration. At least you can call the police, somebody, informing them that this is what's happening. We spend so much time texting these days. Maybe you can text somebody when it's safe to do so. But anyway, I included a few of these things. Yeah. Any question, comments?
I just want to say thank you, Father Shea, for being here, for sharing your work and your experience with all of us. I've really enjoyed this and learned a lot. So thank you for your time.
No, you're welcome. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All righty. Thanks all. Have a good afternoon.